right, hello everyone. Welcome to session 4 of Product University. This is our last session in the month of May. We have 4 further sessions in June, but today we're going to continue our more in-depth scientific discussions on the various platforms for product application that we have on our body. Of course, last week we went through the skin physiology, some of the skincare, and even some of the hair and body care products, their key ingredients. So for today, we are continuing that with talking about hair physiology and specifically the Bodolab Deserti Plus hair care products. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and let's get started. All right, so yes, today's topic is in focus on the hair physiology in Rheumon. We're going to break down not only your hair follicle, but the hair shaft, or otherwise the dead part of your hair, and then we're going to go through each offering within the Bodolab Deserti Plus hair care products. So to start off, I want to look at our hair in a more general overview. Humans have a lot of hair, so we have roughly 5 million hair follicles. It's roughly covering the entirety of our body, save for some key parts like our palms, our soles of our feet, the vermilion zone of our lips. But hair specifically is a flexible and thin keratin thread. It has great strength, has great elasticity. It's rather resilient, of course, until you incorporate certain damages or otherwise environmental exposures. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So with the presence of hair, it plays a huge part, of course, in aesthetics and in self-expression. You can dye your hair, you can style your hair daily, even in the way that you cut your hair. It's all a way for you to present yourself to the world. With that in mind, of course, hair does have some importance in just to our general involvement in our environment. It offers some UV protection specifically on the scalp. It offers thermoregulation, and it also helps with protection against external elements. You know, it can catch fine dust particles such as the hair inside your nostrils. The list goes on. So it does have some important roles, but it is huge for aesthetics as well. If hair growth in your follicular structure are otherwise unbalanced, and this is something we'll touch on in a bit, there can be a significant impact on the perception of hair health. If you are someone that regularly dyes your hair, or perhaps you don't currently have a good hair care routine, it may present itself as otherwise unkept hair. And so we'll explore how this happens scientifically, how your hair can become damaged, and the ways in which products, and specifically Rheumon's products, can remedy a variety of these aesthetic concerns. So when we look at the hair follicle, really analyzing its location, the various different structural identifiers, so to speak, within it, it's really unique to see that it is still kind of a skin model. If we look at what we saw last week, we still see the 3 layers depicted here with the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. What's important to note is the hair follicle is located within the dermis, but is considered part of the epidermis. As you can see in this depiction, the epidermis envelops around the hair follicle, developing the hair bulb, and ultimately the pathway through which the hair shaft will grow. And with this in mind, it's actually called, or is rather part of, the pilosebaceous unit. And this pilosebaceous unit, that name really helps clarify what's involved in the unit. So with the pilosebaceous unit, if you think of pili or pilo, that's the hair itself. You also have sebum or sebaceous. That's actually going to be the sebaceous gland that is part of this unit. So this produces that oil that lubricates the hair shaft to allow it to easily protrude out from the surface of the skin. And of course, there's a variety of other important components within this unit. You also have your erector pili muscle. This is the muscle that pulls your hair standing up straight when you get goosebumps or for you to enhance your perception of sensory experiences. So with that all in mind, when we're focusing on the hair follicle in reference to hair care products and specifically things that come in contact with your scalp, we want to ensure that we are identifying the various different parts that can either produce aesthetic concerns or otherwise are important to focus on when you are going towards treatment. So for example, having the sebaceous gland and having it accurately produce oil to allow for that growth of the hair out of the skin, all of that is important to ensure that your hair just grows healthily. With that in mind, we also want to acknowledge the hair bulb. So this is the region that is actively producing hair, and it's at that base where my cursor is located. And specifically by the hair bulb is the dermal papilla. So this is a structure of nerve fibers and capillaries that supply oxygen, blood, nutrients that help hair cells essentially differentiate or grow. And so the creation of a singular unit of hair is very similar to how skin cell cycles go. So the growth of hair really starts by having new skin cells differentiate. So basically keratinocytes, if you'll remember from last week, and they begin to divide and begin to grow, and they push older cells upward and away from this blood supply that is at the base of the hair bulb. And that, of course, gradually leads to cell death. So much like how your keratinocytes are your skin cells in the normal skin matrix that we explored, keratinocytes also eventually become keratin, which is the protein that hair is made up of. And so with that differentiation, as those cells begin to push up and eventually die off, it just begins to create a longer piece of hair depending on the location on your body. Of course, with your hair on the top of your head, it has a very long growth phase, so it can grow quite long, versus the hair on your body typically has a much shorter growth phase. This is also something we'll explore, but that cell cycle and that creation of new and divided cells into dead cells is a bit shorter for those shorter pieces of hair on our body. And so all of this in mind, what's also really important to note is that at that base with the dermal papilla and at that hair bulb is also where there are melanocytes located. And again, if you'll remember with our discussion on skin physiology, the melanocytes are the cell types that create melanin or pigment. In this instance, the melanocytes are depositing pigment into the hair to give your hair its characteristic color. And the differentiation of various different cells, various different pigments, deposition within these cells allows for each single strand to even have a different color. For myself, I of course have auburn hair or red hair, but I have many blonde strands as well, many brown strands. So each individual hair follicle is unique in how it has that process of cell differentiation and ultimately of hair growth. Now, before we move on to the next slide, what's really important to note in the entirety of this presentation is that this is considered the living part of your hair. This is where nutrients are actively supplied, where there's active cell differentiation, and where there's generally an effect you can have on the growth itself of your hair. As soon as your hair extends past your skin, it is considered dead. And realistically, that's where many cosmetic products are going to target, with conditioning and fine-tuning those strands of otherwise dead keratin to maintain the beauty of those strands. And so the more scientific name or analysis of that dead part of hair is your hair shaft. So it's your visible part of your hair, but it's made of those cells that are no longer alive. They've been fully differentiated and have been pushed out of that hair follicle. It's composed of three key layers of keratin, and the middle is called the medulla. What's unique about the medulla is that scientists don't really know what function it'll have, and in certain instances in hair types, both in animals and in humans, there is actually no medulla at all. And so it's really not understood what the medulla does, but what's important for discussion is specifically the cortex and the cuticle. The cortex makes up most of the hair shaft. It's what contains those pigmenting cells, the melanin, are responsible for your hair color. With this cortical layer being the most robust layer, it has a multitude of different characteristics that allow for the ultimate appreciation of hair aesthetic, for lack of a better term. So your cortex has a majority of your hair bonds. This is what it ensures not only the elasticity, but the strength of your hair is within these bonds in the cortex. And then of course your cuticle is those tightly packed scales you can see in the depiction here that protect and create a hydrophobic coating around the cortex. So the cortical layer plays a vital role in determining both the physical and the mechanical properties of the hair. And so with that in mind, when we look towards the specific bonds occurring within the cortex, you'll have very weak bonds called hydrogen bonds or even van der Waals forces. And then you'll have very strong bonds called disulfide bonds. So those weak bonds, those hydrogen bonds, can easily be disrupted when you introduce water. For example, if you take a shower and your hair goes from curly to wavy or even straight, that's actually those hydrogen bonds being broken. And as your hair dries, they form again, and that reintroduces that curl to your hair or whatever your typical hairstyle is. Furthermore, when you flat iron your hair or when you come into humidity, that also breaks those hydrogen bonds and causes a temporary reorientation of them. But of course, with the addition of water, those hydrogen bonds break and realign again. Now, on the opposite end, when you have those stronger bonds within the cortex, those are those disulfide bonds. Disulfide bonds traditionally are broken through the processes of dyeing or bleaching the hair. This allows for the deposition of pigment into the cortex, or otherwise the removal of pigment if you are trying to bleach your hair. With that in mind, it is very difficult to reinstall these disulfide bonds. So that's why bleached or dyed hair typically has to have a little bit extra nourishment to maintain an aesthetic level of beautification. For, again, for lack of a better word, I've said aesthetic like 80 times. But with that all in mind, it's important to understand what types of damages you're introducing to your hair on the daily to explore what types of products are useful to your hair. And with all that in mind, it's also important to acknowledge how often you are doing these treatments, how often you're dyeing your hair, or if you're straightening or curling your hair every day. Yes, that is breaking a weaker bond, those hydrogen bonds, but over time that can eventually lead to cuticle damage. And so when we look at the cuticle, this is really the visual part of the hair. While yes, the cortex has those pigments and has the various strength attributes that give your hair elasticity, the cuticle is what we are perceiving. And so your cuticle, while maintaining that hydrophobicity and also a bit of UV protection for the cortex, it itself can become damaged through a variety of daily processes, through that heat treatment or through that dyeing and bleaching. And so this often can cause a otherwise lack of tight packing of these cuticles. And so as you can see in the depiction here, these cuticles are beginning to kind of flay outwards. Some may even break off, leaving gaps within the hair shaft. And so this not only allows for UV rays to penetrate, but to water to penetrate as well, which would increase the porosity of the hair. And so a lot of times when you look towards products that are solely treating the hair shaft, not coming in contact with the hair follicle, you'll want to look for things that otherwise realign or reinforce damaged cuticles to maintain the strength of your hair, at least on the outside. All right, so that was a lot. And so with all of this in mind, so we have the dead part, we have the living part of our hair. We also have, of course, the hair growth phases. And so the hair growth cycle has three key phases, and it's specifically the anagen phase, catagen, and telogen. Specifically with the hair on our arms, legs, eyelashes, and eyebrows, those are the ones that have the much shorter anagen phase than the hair on our head. The hair on our head can be in the anagen growth phase for anywhere from 2 to even 8 years. I know it says 6 years, that's kind of just the traditional, but some people will have even longer hair growth stages. But the anagen phase specifically is where the cells are differentiating, where they're beginning to push out dead cells to the surface of the skin, and they're otherwise creating that nice hair follicle and that hair shaft. With that, with that in mind, most of our hair is in anagen at any one moment in time. The catagen phase, on the other hand, is when growth has stopped and that hair is slowly detaching from the bulb. It's slowly detaching itself from that nutrient supply that's in the dermal papilla. And at any one moment, roughly 2% of all of our scalp hairs are in the catagen phase. And so with this all happening, this essentially is what's called a club hair, and this club hair will naturally fall out eventually. Lastly, that telogen phase. It is fully detached and the hair bulb is going to prepare for another cell cycle or for another hair growth cycle to re-enter into the anagen phase. And so the telogen phase realistically is thought of as the resting phase, and it lasts for about 3 months. It accounts for 10 to 15% of all of our hair at any moment in time. And so while the hair follicle is at rest, the club hair is completely formed. The hair will eventually either fall out on its own or it can be pulled out easily with a little bit of white material, dry material at the root, which tells you pulled out a hair that was already dead versus one that was still growing. And so with that all in mind and acknowledgement of the hair growth stages, we roughly lose about 100 to 200 strands of hair a day. And that's for normal, healthy hair. Of course, there are instances in which hair loss is much more prevalent, and that's something that we won't address in this specific discussion, just on the basis of cosmetic formulations. But roughly 100 to 200 follicles a day of loss is totally normal. But with that in mind, of course, there are a variety of factors influencing healthy hair growth, the process of this hair cycle, and ultimately how much hair you do lose, including hormones, growth factors, and cytokines, and of course, external factors such as exposures to toxins, in nutrients, vitamin B3, the list goes on. And so as we always talk about, we really look to enforce total body beauty, and sometimes total body beauty does start from within. So maintaining a nice nutrient dense daily diet or really reducing your exposure to toxins can actually be important for healthy hair growth as well as, of course, healthy skin. But in understanding the hair growth cycle, there are also, of course, different types of hair. And this is something that is also important to identify because within the different types of hair, there are different types of types, if that makes sense. So there are many different ways to classify your hair. Of course, on the color, based on the curl pattern, the density, the health of your hair. And so if we look towards hair density, for example, you really only have three main choices: thick, medium, and fine. Versus hair color, this is determined by those pigments, what was deposited by those melanocytes. And specifically within the creation of hair color, there is two different types of melanin. And as you see listed, it's eumelanin and pheomelanin. So eumelanin is responsible for dark brown and black hair versus pheomelanin being red or blonde hair. So of course, for myself, I have a higher presence of pheomelanin in my hair. There's also, of course, as I had mentioned, ways to differentiate the hair based on curl pattern. And so you'll have type 1, type 4. The list even goes further, type 4C, A, B. But realistically, and if we look at it in more generally with curl pattern, you'll have straight, wavy, curly, or coily hair. But again, I want to pay respect to the fact that there are so many more intermediate categories within this categorization of curl pattern. And so understanding what type of hair you have in the multiple different ranges of categories, be it the curl pattern or be it the color, really can help you address your own hair health and your own hair routine. And so in understanding, for example, your hair density, if you have coarse hair, it's going to be the thickest. It's often more resistant to chemical processes. And then if you have fine hair, with it being the thinnest, it's more fragile. And so with knowing that, you also can understand what types of treatments your hair can handle. But specifically, when we look towards the classification of curl pattern, for example, this actually tells you the ways in which your hair is growing, which I think is fascinating. So when you have straight hair, for example, the hair follicle and the protrusion of the hair shaft out of the skin is relatively straight, and that gives the lack of angularity to that hair. Versus wavy or curly hair, as you can see in this cartoon depiction, you begin to get an angle on that hair follicle that determines the ultimate wave of the hair shaft or hair strand once it comes out of your head. If you then take a cross section of any of these strands, you can also see that the hair strands themselves are different in shape. You might have one that's perfectly circular in a straight hair capacity versus one that's rather elliptical in a more curly or curvy hair capacity. So understanding this too is really unique in regards to hair physiology, in just that each person is so unique and each hair follicle is unique. You can have one hair that is wavy and another that is straight, and that determines the different types of hair follicle in regards to its angle that it's growing at, which very in-depth, you do not need to know, but for the purpose of our discussion today, I think it is important to point out. All of this said, there is a couple of different things we should consider within the categorization for curl pattern. And with the curlier hair we get with wavy, curly, coily, you also often get more porous hair. And of course, more porous hair's ability to absorb and retain moisture is increased. And that's good to an extent, but this also means that they're more susceptible to frizz and also to damage. And so with more porous hair, you'll want to be gentle with your hair, brushing it after you get out of the shower, because obviously there's still water within your hair strands. So in the various types of, or rather the various identifications of hair types, there are a couple of different considerations you can take in educating yourself for your ultimate hair care routine. All right, and before we finish up with the different hair concerns and how Bodolab immediately addresses them, I also want to identify that your scalp itself still is a platform for product application. There was a more recent trend called the skinification of the scalp, and it's realistically just acknowledging that your scalp is an extension of your facial skin. It too has those three main layers. It too needs, exfoliation, moisturization to have a balanced environment of, if in this case, for hair growth. And so With that specifically, I also want to identify that on your scalp, you also have a powerful microbiome. And this microbiome is also important, not only in encouraging hair moisturization and hair strength, but also in maintaining a comfortable environment for that hair. For example, if you have an overgrowth of specific bacteria, this can actually cause dandruff, for example. And so understanding that your microbiome on your scalp also needs some gentleness and some reinforcement can really help you in your hair care journey. Right. And so with all of that in mind, I of course want to point out some common hair concerns that we'll address today with the products and the ingredients in the Deserticola Plus line. So dryness and dandruff, again, can sometimes coincide, but dryness is where the hair follicles aren't producing the necessary amount of sebum to properly coat both the scalp and the hair shaft. And so dry scalps can be flaky and can experience that flakiness. You can also experience tightness, itchiness. The list goes on for ways in which dryness may present. With dandruff, this can also be intense dryness or a microbiome imbalance. Specifically, in the microbiome instance, this is a specific genus of bacteria called Malassezia furfur. Oh, excuse me, a genus of fungi, actually. And so this Malassezia furfur in abundance can cause dandruff as well. So understanding not only that you need a balanced microbiome, but perhaps need a reinforcement of moisturization and hydration can be key in ameliorating some of that dandruff. Or perhaps you do need more aggressive forms of treatment, a dandruff shampoo, which are traditionally OTC formulations because they contain an otherwise monographed drug in their product. But anyways, on the opposite end, we have oiliness. Your hair is extremely oily. Your hair follicles producing too much sebum, either due to hormonal regulation or overwashing. And this is very similar to the oiliness you may experience on your facial skin. If you overwash, your skin may produce more sebum to compensate for that dryness, and that creates the illusion of oily skin, or in this instance, hair. But of course, oiliness can be simply based on your hormones, based on how often you're touching your hair. Like if you're like me, I catch myself every time I tuck my bangs behind my ears and it drives me crazy. But anyways, all of that oiliness can be a variety of different factors causing it. Well, one thing you want to make sure is that your hair care routine either ameliorates it or otherwise is not adding more oil to your scalp. And last but certainly not least, cuticle damage. Your hair shaft is either missing cuticles, the cuticles are misaligned, they're flayed upwards like they were in that depiction, and that leads to an increase in hydrophobicity, an increase in weakness in these strands. They easily may break or may appear brittle. They can look frizzy even though you haven't come in contact with water. And so more often than not, many people are looking to address cuticle damage because that is the majority of our hair, especially of longer hair. You really see a lot of that damage in regards to how those cuticles are portraying as kind of flyaways or as split ends rather. And of course, within this, there's also a variety of other concerns that are of the medical category. So alopecia or any hair loss in that. And in that regard, as we are a cosmeceutical grade brand, I pay respect to those, but we won't discuss them for today. And all right, so with that, with the common hair concerns identified, the structure of the hair identified as well, let's get into Deserticola Plus. And so with hair and with Remon, Deserticola Plus is not only the name of the products, but it's also the key performing ingredient. And so Deserticola is a microalgae that is native to desert biomes. When scientists had discovered this microalgae, they were taking the various extracts to understand how it was surviving in these arid conditions, and they found a specific metabolite called loleolide. Once this was discovered, we began to collaborate with Dr. Hee-Sik Kim and the Korea Research Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology. Dr. Hee-Sik Kim is now considered an axologist or askologist. So if you remember Ask Company from week 1, that's that parent company for Ask Labs and Ask Base. He now works with Ask Labs directly. And so in that collaboration and in that work with Crib, we were able to concentrate that loleolide to 12 times in terms of traditional sources alone. That was just Deserticola. And then now with the reformulation and the relaunch of the products, we now have Deserticola Plus, where the loleolide has been increased threefold on top of that. All of this is fantastic because Lululine is known to interact with the dermal cells within the hair follicle to modify hair growth. If you'll see this specific image I've included here, the Lululine was able to regulate the hair follicle by specifically regulating specific signaling pathways within the papilla cells. So those cells that are at the dermal papilla that are right at that base of the hair bulb, they're able to essentially interact at that base. And so it also, while having performance with the hair follicle for the scalp and for even the dead part of the hair, your hair shaft, it poses antioxidant and anti-apoptotic properties. So antioxidative, of course, that's just the fighting against oxidative species. And with anti-apoptotic, it essentially reduces cell death. So again, that's going to be more within the hair follicle, but maintains healthy cells that continue to differentiate and continue to encourage hair growth. Now, alongside the Deserta Coil Plus, which is in all three of the products, we have two new key ingredients, again, that came with this relaunch and this reformulation that are specific to the shampoo and to the conditioner. The first is actually chlorella oil, and chlorella oil is a beautiful ingredient. It's actually an upcycled ingredient. And so if you're not familiar with upcycling, this essentially is the utilization of a product that would otherwise be discarded and the creation of something that is even better than that original thing. And so chlorella oil, for example, is a byproduct of natural chlorella sourcing. And chlorella is actually that microalgae that is Deserticola Plus in essence, so to speak. So if you look at the back with your ingredient list for your shampoo, your conditioner, or the hair oil serum, you'll see Chlorella vulgaris listed. And in this instance, chlorella oil is another part of this microalgae that we were able to use for benefit to both scalp and strands. So not only does it contain various vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, but it's also rich in biotin, sulfur, and chlorophyll. Now, biotin, of course, is an extremely important vitamin for the hair strength. Biotin is within the cortex of your hair. Sulfur, if you'll remember, we have those disulfide bonds that maintain the strength of our hair. Chlorophyll is powerful as an antioxidant, so reducing again the potential for oxidative species to be created within the hair strands. And all of this in mind, we also have it as an anti-inflammatory agent, mainly for the scalp specifically, just reducing any appearance of inflammation, either due to a microbiome imbalance, due to overwashing, or otherwise scalp dryness. That second hero ingredient that's included in both the shampoo and the conditioner are actually wild olive stem cells. So these are another beautiful ingredient in that they perform with a really holistic appreciation of your hair. It looks at the hair strand, it looks at the hair follicle, it looks at the scalp itself, all as one system and benefits each component in kind. So it protects, reinforces, and regenerates the whole hair structure from scalp and to the hair shaft, or the ends of the hair rather. And so specific raw material supplier guidelines source that the wild olive stem cells actually reinforce the whole scalp and hair structure by preventing protein carbonylation. So this essentially prevents protein buildup within the hair strands and also protecting from oxidative stress. It also helps deliver nutrients to your hair fibers to enhance penetration of those nutrients. So all of that said and done, this wild olive stem cell, while being a natural ingredient, is perfect for every application in hair care, be it something that cleanses the scalp or nourishes the hair shaft. And so with that in mind, before we break down the individual products, I also always like to point out that the entire Bodolab line, in both in body care and hair care, but in this instance in the hair care, is certified vegan. And so we previously had the E vegan label, and then with the reintroduction, we now are V label certified. V-Label is an independent organization. It's a seal, but it's also an organization itself that assesses and issues vegan certificates for a variety of different goods. So it can be in personal care industry, or it can be in the food or textile industries. And realistically, our status as V-Label means that each product in the Bodolab line has no animal byproducts and really looks towards loving both your hair, your skin, but also the planet. And of course, that's true for the variety of the different products outside of the hair care and body care offerings. We have no cruelty, anything within the products, but that extra step with this V-Label certification really helps these products stand out. And so specifically a little more on V-Label, is actually established in 1996 in Switzerland, And as of today, there's roughly been 70,000 different products for more than 4,800 licensees that now carry the V label. So it's largely recognized. It's a very prestigious label to boast. And so we are proud to do so in kind. All right, so now let's get into the products finally. So we've identified the various different hair concerns: dryness, oiliness, dandruff as well, and of course, cuticle damage. And so when we look towards the first step of cleansing, which is kind of ironic when you think about, we always talk about the K-beauty tenets of skincare, of cleanse, hydrate, and protect. Realistically, that's very similar for your hair as well, and these products really satisfy them quite well. We start with cleansing with the Deserticola Plus shampoo. So it has that Deserticola Plus, it has chlorella oil, wild olive stem cells, and a variety of other very gentle surfactants to perform that cleansing without stripping your scalp. This is crucial for helping build or remove buildup of daily debris, daily oil that you come in contact with, but it's not going to introduce dryness to the scalp or introduce a microbiome imbalance. Because of how gentle those surfactants are in formulation, if you do just naturally have oilier hair or you do have very thick hair, even like Betty, our GM, you can go in twice with this product in a singular wash. And it's really going to help pick up all of those oils or really get to the bottom of cleansing if your hair is that dense. But to use this product realistically, all you need is to work it into a rich lather on the entirety of the scalp for roughly 30 seconds to a minute. Myself personally, I don't really wash the ends of my hair with shampoo because most of it kind of runs down the hair as you rinse it out. But it's important to not always directly apply shampoo to the ends of your hair because it may dry out those more vulnerable parts of your hair, if you'll remember. But next, of course, you go in with your hydrate, with your conditioner. And so for us, that's the Deserticola Plus conditioner. Again, same thing. It was previously called the water treatment. It is still the same in regards to its introduction. It comes water thin. It comes into contact with the water in your shower or bath, and it begins to cream up as it comes in contact. For this unit specifically, yes, we still have the wild olive stem cells and the chlorella oil, but we also have conditioning polymers, and those are going to come in and address a variety of different concerns for the hair shaft specifically, especially cuticle damage. Your hair has a slightly natural negative charge, and so when you utilize conditioning polymers, which are typically in any conditioner that you'll buy on the market, they have a slightly positive charge, and they bind to that negative charge and help otherwise align your cuticles to reinforce the aesthetic beauty of them. But we also, of course, have a variety of natural oils and, excuse me, and other complexes to help maintain not only the beautification of the hair shaft, but the moisturization and balance of your skin microbiome and of your skin barrier on your scalp as well. So that helps address, of course, dryness, dandruff, and of course, that cuticle damage as well. Now, with this product, it's important to note there are a couple of different ways in which you can utilize them. So you can apply the conditioner directly to your scalp if you're looking to have the benefits of maintaining healthy hair density. And so that comes in combination with use of the shampoo. And you have to use both every day to see the ultimate results that were previously tested by Korea HQ. If you're someone like myself that I don't necessarily look for the benefits of maintaining healthy hair density, I'm just looking for beautification of the dead part of my hair, of the hair shaft, I only apply it to the mid to the ends of the hair and I leave my scalp alone. So realistically, it is up to you in your entire skin comfort, your hair comfort, and your hair goals as well. And last but not least, of course, is that hair oil serum. So the hair oil serum is a 5-in-1 finishing serum. It provides heat protection up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, increases shine, reduces frizz, maintains volume, and seals damaged cuticles. It also includes giant byungpo leaf extract, which helps again nourish strands and repair damage. And now with this relaunch and the reformulation, a new addition is this C-Plex. And this C-Plex is such a cool ingredient. So C-Plex is actually a biodegradable product that combines the power of seaweed or macroalgae rather with amino acids and peptides to remedy a variety of problems, specifically within the realm of bleaching hair. So as you may know, bleaching is one of the most damaging things you can do to your hair, but by all means do it because I understand the importance of looking good and feeling good, but just understanding how to nourish your hair after that treatment is important. But with the creation of Cplex, it was initially created for inclusion into bleach treatments or post-bleach treatments, which I think is really powerful for the utilization of this product, in that if we look at bleach damaged hair as the most damaged, it can only further offer benefits to even the more robust or more strong hair types, stronger hair types. So it offers benefits in regards to increasing tensile strength of your hair, reducing frizz, maintaining the moisture of your hair, and reducing hair porosity. So reducing that capability of hair to absorb water. All of this while, of course, enhancing shine. And so this system is perfect for realistically right after you got out of the shower and you want to apply it after your hair has been air dried, or if you've styled it, hair throughout the day, you can apply it whenever, wherever. And the other important thing to note is with this reformulation and relaunch, we actually did remove D4 and D5 silicones from this formulation. Those are cyclic silicones that are pending a ban in the EU, and so we are proactive and we removed it from those formulations. So the main silicone is dimethicone, which has no safety concerns or toxicological profiles as of that I know of. But all right, so that was another one. That was another lengthy and in-depth discussion on hair physiology and Remon products. So of course I wanted to offer another recap like we did last week. So when we analyze the hair, there's really two main features: the hair follicle, or the living part of the hair, in which hair cells differentiate constantly and you're getting growth of new strands, and the hair shaft, which is that dead part of the hair, extends from the scalp and is composed of tightly packed keratin in those three distinct layers, but realistically in importance two. And so it's gonna be the cortex and the cuticle layers on the outside. Your scalp is another important component of hair health, and that it contains the same structure and layers as the facial skin or body skin. It also has a microbiome with a variety of bacterial species that aid in the surface, or excuse me, in the health of that surface of your skin. And so we recognize the importance of scalp care as well in hair care with Remon. And so while there are multiple pathways for hair issues to arise, we chose to focus on four main common issues in our discussion today. We pointed out dryness and dandruff, oiliness, and cuticle damage. With dryness, you're either not getting enough production of sebum, you perhaps are overwashing, or perhaps you are coming in constant contact with an external aggressor, such as UV rays directly to the scalp, that is drying out your scalp skin. Dandruff can be a microbiome imbalance or just the extreme end of this dryness. Oiliness being the opposite end of it, where you are again are overwashing, but your skin is overcompensating for that, or perhaps you truly are just producing too much sebum. And cuticle damage, when you have those daily aggressors, be it styling of the hair, bleaching or dyeing of the hair, which otherwise leaves those cuticles unaligned, or gaps in the hair shaft through which water can be absorbed, which reduces the hydrophobicity of your hair strand. And so in acknowledgement of all of this, we collaborated with Crib, with Dr. Hee-Sik Kim, and were able to create Deserticola and then Deserticola Plus for application in our hair care products. This boasts loleolide, which is a microalgal extract with potent benefits to both your hair follicle and your hair strand. We combine this with chlorella oil, wild olive stem cells, and a variety of industry favorites, as well as conditioning polymers and oils, to create a robust yet simple offering of hair care products in the basic line of cleansing, hydrating, and protecting your scalp and your hair strands. The Desertico Plus shampoo specifically cleanses the scalp, removes daily impurities, but it doesn't strip the skin. It maintains an overall balance to promote healthy cellular function and ultimately the maintenance of healthy hair density. The Deserticola Plus conditioner is a conditioning treatment that reinforces damaged cuticles to help them kind of realign and kind of look more shiny and healthier post-wash, but it also helps to nourish the scalp if you are applying it directly to the scalp. And that hair oil serum is that perfect 5-in-1 finishing serum for dry, air-dried, styled, wet, anything hair, just when you need that reinforcement of that cuticle strength and also that beautification with the increase in shine and the reduction in frizz. All right, and with that all in mind, of course, we still have an outline for y'all, so feel free to scan the QR code here. We are also dropping it in the chat. And so I'll pause here while y'all get that downloaded. And again, I reiterate rather that you don't need to know this in such specificity, but it's cool to know at the same time, especially as a consumer. I'm a consumer myself, to really make those educated decisions and also to feel more trusting of a brand. Like with the identification of the hair physiology, in our understanding of it, and in my understanding of the Remon products, there's a huge harmony here, which is very relieving in using products myself. So I'll stop yapping and I'll let you guys download this QR code or download this outline. All right, and so next week, of course, we've touched on the skin, we touched on the hair. Let's now touch on lightening. So next week's topic is lightening beauty from the inside out. We'll explore our two current offerings within the US and Canada markets, which of course are Deep Talk and the Beauty Collagen EX, but we'll of course give some platforms to both of those. We'll explore the gut microbiome, we'll explore supplementation in general, so it'll be a fantastic discussion next week. But again, I have to reiterate that our last session, or excuse me, our second to last session is that Q&A session. I'm already receiving questions. I'm so grateful to you all who are sending them to me, but please continue to send questions marked product Q&A or product university Q&A to ritual@Remon. And we ask you do so by June 11th so that I can collaborate with HQ and the brand managers if I need to get you some concise answers. And last but not least, before we hang up tonight, I wanted to mention that, of course, this is our last session in May. We have 4 further sessions in June. I want to make sure y'all don't miss them. I know Zoom does a weird thing where it hides the June dates with a very small scroll down bar. And so some people don't see that scroll down, they click the 4 May dates and they're registered. But make sure you are registered for the June dates as well. I don't want to see a drop off in attendance, and I want to make sure you can get recognized at Roadmap. So please scan this QR code. It'll take you back to that registration link. Again, we are also dropping it in the chat as well. Just make sure you're registered for June. If you're having any difficulties or you aren't sure if you successfully registered, again, just use the ritual@Remon email and feel free to email me and I will check on your behalf. But with that in mind, I so appreciate y'all being here. I know this was another dense conversation, but so important for our appreciation of the products. And I'm getting over a little cold, so I apologize if I was kind of dancing around a bit or if I sound like I had a frog in my throat. But I so appreciate your time tonight, and I'm so looking forward to our next discussion next week, starting again in June. And on that note, I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday wherever you are, and I will see you next week.